So these early knowledge utilization studies going back to the 70s, the instrumental utilization of knowledge contributes to a short-term problem or practice or policy decision. That was the first framework I had up there, the sort of technocratic approach to knowledge utilization. And Carol Weiss has an old piece in Harvard Ed Review back in, I think, 77 on this topic. The conceptual utilization of knowledge used more for enlightenment or understanding than for immediate action. Her argument was this notion of knowledge creep. As we put our ideas out there into the universe, we begin to contribute to the creation of this new common sense. It's a little bit like that Milton Friedman quote I ended my talk with yesterday, right? What are the ideas laying around that people pick up and use? And how do we get those ideas out there into the public realm so that people begin thinking differently about school reform? The political right has been very effective at that, and they've done it a lot through the sort of framing notion. You know, like if you read George Lakoff's work, that sort of policy framing idea, that it's not about ideas, it's about framing, right? If you can just frame the issues well, and that people respond to these deep frames that are not necessarily rational, but and I'm not saying that's where we should go, right? But we need to be aware of how people are taking up our work and frame it in ways that people can be more accepting of it. Yeah, so we have this now evidence-based what works approach has become the dominant goal of research. Qualitative research is viewed as lacking the methodological tools that allow for social prediction. This is kind of the framing of the problem, right? Is that in a what works world, you know, qualitative research doesn't do such a good job at telling people what works, right? Except in a much more nuanced level, but that doesn't seem to be what policymakers are looking for at this point. So what does policy do? It should take up issues of complexity, context, causality, audience, advocacy, and epistemology. It's most useful for problem definition, agenda setting, and policy utilization enactment. Some of the policy frameworks that are most useful are the Kingdon's multiple streams approach, advocacy coalition, critical policy analysis. And these areas are what we want to explore, and I'll just run through them very quickly. Knowledge as policy borrowing, I talked a little bit about that already. Interdisciplinary diverse epistemologies, right? So that we think about our research as, so that, say, participatory action research should be a legitimate form of action, of qualitative research, but currently it isn't. Diverse audiences. Policy knowledge is produced in multiple sites by diverse communities for diverse audiences. I think this is a goal. It's already happening. Policy knowledge is political, and like scientific knowledge is actively promoted by networks of knowledge advocates. I'm referring to Thomas Kuhn's work on scientific revolutions, right? That great scientific theories were actually promoted by scientific communities. And that also is the case with policy knowledge. We have to acknowledge the fact that those with the most power, the most corporate money, and the best political strategies are promoting their ideas very effectively, and we're not. Policy knowledge should be decolonizing. I won't go into that. I'm sure some of you have read some of De Sousa Santos' work on the Global South, and Linda Smith's work on Aborigines in Australia. That there are multiple notions of causality and validity, and that's where the piece with Janelle that I wrote on process causality, that we need to sort of reclaim causality in this sense, and that we need to be able to do work with somewhat higher inferences to understand the relationship between the micro and the macro. You know, in qualitative research, we seem to have this low inference notion, which is, of course, it's important because in quantitative research we have the 0.05 or the 0.01 significance level, which is a low level of inference for our results. You know, we do need something similar in qualitative research, but sometimes I think if we're going to do more holistic research, we can't be so worried about low inference that we're afraid to, include anything from the macro level in our analysis, and how to make those links in some way that is credible and plausible.